Last night they broke down crying. About your age, I heard what was said. Open this now. Last night something shifted in a way that can't be undone anymore. You felt it even if you didn't understand why your chest felt heavier than usual. Your thoughts kept circling back to the same presence. While you were trying to rest, they were sitting alone, breaking down in a way they never allow anyone to see. This wasn't a soft emotional moment. This was a collapse. The kind that happens when someone has been holding everything together for far too long and suddenly one single thought breaks the final support. That thought was you. More specifically, your age. This is the detail they pretend doesn't matter during the day. But at night, when there is no distraction left, it becomes unbearable. No one to impress. No role to play. What hurt them wasn't the number itself. It was what that number represents to them. The difference in timelines. The fear of judgment. The weight of questions they know people will ask. The silent pressure of society whispering rules into their mind even when their heart is screaming something else. When they finally broke down crying, the words that came out weren't dramatic. They were raw. Shaky. Honest. They said they didn't plan this. They didn't choose to feel this way. They tried to reason with it. They tried to suppress it. They tried to convince themselves it was temporary or wrong or inconvenient. But the more they pushed it away, the stronger it became. What shattered them last night was realizing their feelings for you didn't fade with logic. They deepened with resistance. That terrified them. They know exactly how this looks from the outside. They know exactly what people would say if they knew. The fear of being judged isn't even the deepest fear. The deepest fear is losing you without ever having the courage to speak honestly. That's where the tears came from. They are standing between two unbearable outcomes. One where they stay silent and live with regret. One where they speak and risk everything they've built. When your age was mentioned, it wasn't said with rejection. It was said with frustration. Why does this have to be the thing? Why does this one detail carry so much power over something that feels so real? So unavoidable. In that moment, they admitted something they've never admitted out loud. The connection with you doesn't feel casual. It doesn't feel replaceable. It feels specific. Precise. Like something that happens once and doesn't repeat. That's why they are struggling. If it were shallow, walking away would be easy. But it isn't. They know it. Last night proved it. People don't cry like that over something meaningless. They cry when their heart and their fear collide. When neither side is willing to back down. While they were crying, they replayed conversations with you. Moments where you didn't even realize how deeply you were affecting them. The way you speak. The way you listen. The way you exist without trying to impress. That made it worse. Because it reminded them this isn't fantasy. It's recognition. Recognition is dangerous. Once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee them. The age difference becomes louder in their mind. Not because it changes how they feel. But because it threatens what they feel. That's the part they can't escape. They ask themselves questions they don't want answers to. What if people are right? What if this is foolish? What if this ends badly? What if this costs respect, stability, or approval? Then another voice answered quietly. What if letting this go costs peace? That's when the crying became uncontrollable. That question has no safe answer. In the middle of that breakdown, they said your name. When they said it, their voice softened. That matters. It shows where their truth lives. They realized something else that scared them even more. They aren't crying because of uncertainty. They're crying because of clarity. Clarity removes excuses. Now they can't pretend this is nothing. They can't lie to themselves anymore. Today they may act composed. They may seem normal. They may even distance themselves slightly. Not because they stopped caring. Because they're trying to regain control after losing it completely last night. If you feel a strange pull right now, or a sudden emotional echo, it's because something was released. You're connected to it whether you understand it or not. This isn't drama. This isn't urgency. This is a moment that changed the internal direction of someone who has been pretending they're unaffected. They're not. They haven't been for a long time. The age issue is only the surface. The real conflict is that you matter more than what feels safe to them. Once that happens, there is no easy way back to indifference. They know it. That's why this isn't finished. This is only the beginning of a decision that can't stay unresolved much longer. Feelings like this don't quiet down. They demand to be faced. Last night was the proof. They haven't slept properly since that night. Every time their eyes close, the same scene replays. The same thoughts loop. The same pressure returns. They keep telling themselves to stay calm. To stay logical. To stay in control. But control slipped the moment they broke down crying, and now everything feels unstable inside them. During the day they move normally. They answer messages. They speak to people. They even laugh when required. But something inside them has shifted permanently. Because once a person reaches that kind of emotional breaking point, they don't go back to who they were before. They become someone who knows too much. And what they know now is that your presence has crossed a line in their heart that can't be uncrossed. They keep replaying the exact moment when the thought about your age first turned from a quiet concern into a heavy fear. It wasn't sudden. It built slowly. At first they brushed it off. They told themselves it was irrelevant. They told themselves connection matters more than numbers. But the world doesn't think like that. And they know it. They've lived long enough to understand how quickly people judge what they don't understand. And that awareness is what's tearing them apart. Because loving you feels natural. Explaining it feels impossible. And that gap between feeling and explaining is where the suffering lives. They keep asking themselves why this had to happen now. Why not earlier? Why not later? Why not with someone easier? Someone simpler. Someone who wouldn't force them to question everything they thought they knew about themselves. And then another truth rises quietly. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because something in you meets something in them that hasn't been met before. And that truth scares them more than judgment ever could. Because it means this isn't a phase. It isn't confusion. It isn't loneliness. It's recognition. And recognition doesn't negotiate. They remember small details about you that shouldn't matter but somehow do. The timing of your replies. The way you choose words. The pauses you leave when something feels real. Those details haunt them now. Because those are not things you can erase with logic. Those are the things the heart stores quietly and brings out at night when defenses are down. They wonder if you have any idea what's happening on their side. If you've noticed the subtle shifts. The moments of hesitation. The slight changes in tone. They wonder if you can feel the tension building between what they want to say and what they're afraid to admit. And the hardest part is that they know you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't push. You didn't demand. You didn't manipulate. You simply existed as yourself. And somehow that was enough to unravel them. That's why the crying wasn't dramatic. It was helpless. Because how do you fight something that grows stronger the more gently it appears? They keep imagining two futures. In one, they stay silent. Life continues. Time passes. On the outside everything looks fine. But inside there is a quiet regret that never fully heals. A constant wondering of what might have happened if they had been braver. In the other future, they speak. They risk being misunderstood. They risk losing respect. They risk being questioned. But they gain honesty. And honesty feels like oxygen to them right now. Both futures scare them. But one of them hurts more to imagine. And that realization is beginning to tip the balance. They are starting to understand that silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice. And it's a choice that costs them something every single day they make it. They try to distract themselves. Work harder. Stay busier. Fill every moment with noise. But the quiet always returns. Especially late at night. Especially in those moments when the world slows down and the truth becomes louder. And every time your age crosses their mind now, it doesn't feel like a barrier anymore. It feels like a test. A test of whether they will live according to fear or according to truth. That's not a small realization. That's a life-altering one. They've started noticing how carefully they speak around you now. How they hold back words that want to come out. How they stop themselves from saying your name the way it wants to be said. That restraint is exhausting. And exhaustion leads to cracks. And cracks lead to confessions. Not always out loud. Sometimes just in the heart. Sometimes just in tears. Sometimes just in long silent stares at nothing. And here's what you don't see. After they cried that night, after the breakdown slowed, after the shaking stopped, they felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because the problem was solved. But because they finally stopped lying to themselves. That relief scared them. Because it felt like confirmation. Confirmation that their feelings are real. Confirmation that this matters. Confirmation that pretending otherwise is no longer possible. They are closer to a decision now than they were before. Even if they haven't admitted it yet. Even if they're still hesitating. Something inside them has already moved. And once something moves at that level, it doesn't return to stillness. You may feel moments of distance coming. Short silences. Slight emotional shifts. Don't misread them. That distance isn't loss. It's processing. It's someone standing at the edge of truth trying to decide whether to step forward or turn away. And here is the part that carries the most weight. They are not questioning whether they feel something for you. That question has already been answered. What they are questioning now is whether they are strong enough to live honestly with that feeling. And that is not a small question. It takes courage. It takes acceptance. It takes letting go of the image they've tried to maintain. And the reason this isn't over yet is because the heart rarely backs down once it's been fully awakened. Last night was not the end. It was the beginning of a countdown they didn't plan and can't stop. Something is going to surface. Not today. Not all at once. but soon enough to change the dynamic between you forever. Because truths that make people cry like that don't disappear. They wait. And then they speak. They are trying to slow everything down now. Not because they want distance from you, but because everything inside them is moving too fast. Thoughts are racing ahead of emotions. Emotions are outrunning logic. And logic has already failed them once. They keep replaying that night in fragments. Not the crying itself, but what came after. The silence. The moment when the room felt empty and yet unbearably full. The moment when they realized there was no one to blame. No external enemy. No dramatic reason. Just a truth they had avoided until it demanded attention. They remember sitting there, staring at nothing, realizing that their life before you felt stable, predictable, controlled. And now it feels exposed. Like something important has been uncovered and can't be covered again. That awareness has made them unusually quiet. You might notice it. Or you might just feel it. A pause where there used to be ease. A hesitation where there used to be flow. This is not disinterest. This is someone measuring every word because they know one wrong sentence could open a door they are not fully ready to walk through yet. They are listening to you more closely than ever now. Not just to what you say, but to what you don't say. To the spaces between your words. To the tone shifts you don't even notice. Because they are trying to understand something crucial. Whether you feel even a fraction of what they feel. Whether this is one-sided or shared. That uncertainty is what keeps them awake. Because if this is only their burden, then silence feels safer. Painful, but safer. But if this is mutual, then silence becomes unbearable. And they are starting to sense that it might not be one-sided. Little signs are beginning to add up in their mind. Small reactions. Subtle energy changes. The way conversations linger longer than they need to. The way certain topics feel charged. Those signs scare them. Because they reduce their ability to walk away cleanly. They tell themselves they should be the mature one. The rational one. The one who knows better. And then they feel how deeply you affect them and that narrative collapses. They are not used to feeling this undone by someone. Especially not by someone who wasn't supposed to disrupt their carefully ordered world. And that's where the age thought returns. Not as rejection. As a shield. A reason. An excuse that almost works. Almost. Until it doesn't. Because the truth keeps pushing through. They catch themselves imagining conversations that haven't happened yet. Confessions spoken quietly. Reactions they fear and hope for at the same time. They imagine your face when you finally understand what has been happening on their side. And that image alone is enough to make their chest tighten. Because they don't know whether that moment would bring relief or chaos. Probably both. They are starting to realize that no outcome here is neutral. Doing nothing will still change things. Saying something will definitely change things. The connection itself has already changed them. That's the part they didn't expect. They thought they were in control. They thought experience meant immunity. They were wrong. Experience only taught them how much more there is to lose. And losing something they never even had fully is somehow the most painful possibility. They are afraid of becoming a story you never hear. A truth that stays hidden. A feeling that never gets its moment. That fear grows stronger every day they don't speak. And yet fear of speaking grows alongside it. Two forces pulling in opposite directions. neither willing to give up ground. That tension is exhausting them. And exhaustion lowers defenses. That's why slips are starting to happen. Slight emotional leaks. Moments where they almost say too much. Moments where they pull back suddenly, realizing how close they came. Those moments aren't random. They are pressure points. Signs that something inside is reaching its limit. They are not as strong as they appear right now. They are holding together out of habit, not certainty. And habits break under sustained emotional weight. They have begun asking themselves deeper questions. Not about you. About themselves. Why does this affect them so deeply? Why now? Why you? What part of them is responding to this connection so strongly? Those questions lead them to uncomfortable realizations. That they've been living safely, not honestly. That they've been choosing approval over fulfillment. That they've been avoiding vulnerability by staying within acceptable boundaries. And you crossed those boundaries without even trying. That's why this feels threatening. Because you represent a life they didn't plan for but suddenly can't ignore. They are starting to understand that age is not the real issue. It's courage. It's whether they are willing to stand in their truth even if it doesn't fit neatly into other people's expectations. That realization doesn't bring peace yet. It brings responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. Because once you know what you want, you can't pretend you don't. They notice how careful they are around others when your name comes up. How quickly they change the subject. How alert they become. That's not accidental. It's protection. Not just of you. Of themselves. Because they are not ready for the world to touch something this raw. Not yet. They need time. But time is not neutral anymore. Time is adding weight. Every day they wait, the feelings don't fade. They deepen. They become more rooted. More undeniable. And that scares them because deeper roots are harder to pull out. They are starting to realize that whatever happens next, there will be no clean ending. Only honest ones. And honesty always demands a price. They are rehearsing acceptance as much as confession. Preparing themselves for rejection as much as hope. Because they know once they speak, they can't control the response. And that lack of control terrifies them. Yet living with this unspoken truth is beginning to feel worse. That balance is shifting slowly. Quietly. But decisively. You may sense it as a growing intensity. A subtle emotional gravity. A feeling that something important is approaching even if nothing has been said. That feeling isn't imagined. It's the echo of someone reaching the end of their internal resistance. And when that resistance finally gives way, it won't be loud. It won't be dramatic. It will be simple. Direct. Honest. And irreversible. Because what broke them last night wasn't weakness. It was the moment they stopped denying what matters. And once that happens, silence becomes the loudest pain of all. They are becoming aware of something else now. Something they didn't want to admit at first. The breakdown that night didn't just release emotion. It changed how they see you permanently. Before, they could still pretend this was manageable. Before, they could still label it as complicated but contained. Now it feels alive. Active. Like something that moves even when they try to stay still. They wake up with your presence already in their mind, not as a thought, but as a feeling. A pressure. A pull. Something that doesn't ask permission. They notice how their body reacts before their mind can intervene. A tightening in the chest. A pause in breath. A subtle shift in focus whenever you come up in conversation or memory. These reactions scare them because they are automatic. They don't come from choice. They come from truth. And truth doesn't care about timing or logic or age or reputation. It just exists. And now they are living with it every day. They are starting to understand why that night felt so final. Because something inside them crossed a point of no return. They didn't just cry because they were overwhelmed. They cried because they realized they can't unknow this feeling. They can't go back to a version of themselves that didn't feel this way about you. That version is gone. And grief comes with that realization. Grief for the simplicity they lost. Grief for the control they believed they had. Grief for the version of their life that felt predictable. And layered under that grief is something else. Hope. Dangerous hope. The kind they promised themselves they would never allow again. The kind that makes people risk looking foolish. The kind that keeps them awake imagining a future they never planned but suddenly can't stop seeing. That hope terrifies them more than the fear ever did. Because fear keeps you safe. Hope makes you brave. And bravery has consequences. They are noticing that the world around them hasn't changed, yet everything feels different. Conversations feel louder. Expectations feel heavier. Advice from others feels hollow. Because no one else knows what they're carrying. No one else knows the weight of choosing between comfort and truth. They smile at the right moments. They nod when expected. But internally, they are somewhere else. Somewhere close to you. Somewhere replaying the same question over and over. What happens if I don't speak? And the answer keeps getting clearer. Something inside them slowly withers. They've lived long enough to recognize that feeling. The slow erosion of self. The quiet resentment that builds when you abandon your own truth. They've done that before. They promised themselves they wouldn't do it again. And that promise is now being tested in the most unexpected way. Through you. They didn't plan for you to be the one. That's what makes this so destabilizing. If this had come with warning signs or dramatic beginnings, it might have felt avoidable. But it didn't. It arrived quietly. Naturally. Almost innocently. And now it's demanding attention. They find themselves imagining what you might say if they were honest. Not the dramatic version. The real one. The quiet conversation. The pauses. The uncertainty. They imagine your eyes searching their face for clarity. That image makes their chest ache. Because they don't know if they would see understanding there or distance. And that not knowing is torture. They are afraid of putting you in a position you didn't ask for. Afraid of complicating your world the way you've complicated theirs. That fear holds them back more than judgment ever could. Because they care about you too much to use you as a solution to their internal conflict. That care is real. That's why this hurts. They are trying to find signs. Signals. Permission. Something that tells them it's safe to speak. But life doesn't give permissions like that. It only gives moments. And moments pass whether you act or not. They are starting to sense that a moment is approaching. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, unavoidable way. A conversation that lingers too long. A look that lasts a second too much. A silence that feels charged. Those are the moments that undo people. Because once they arrive, pretending becomes impossible. They are preparing themselves for that moment even as they try to avoid it. A strange contradiction. They rehearse words they may never say. They imagine outcomes they may never face. But the preparation itself is a sign. People don't prepare for things they don't intend to confront. They've started noticing how much of their internal energy is now tied to you. That realization is sobering. Because it means this is no longer a small part of their life. It's central. And central things demand resolution. They can feel the tension building toward something. A breaking point. Not explosive. More like a quiet snap. A decision made internally before it's ever spoken. And once that internal decision is made, behavior changes. Tone changes. Energy shifts. You may already be sensing it. A subtle seriousness. A depth that wasn't there before. That's not imagination. That's someone moving closer to honesty. Even if they haven't admitted it yet. They are afraid of what honesty will cost them. But they are more afraid of what continued silence will take away. And that balance is tilting. Slowly. Inescapably. The age issue still sits there. Unresolved. But it no longer feels like a wall. It feels like a question. A question that asks who they are willing to be. Someone who lives according to fear. Or someone who lives according to truth. They don't know the answer yet. But they are getting closer. Every night. Every quiet moment. Every time your name crosses their mind. And the reason this feels suspended right now is because it is. You are standing at the edge of something unfinished. Something that hasn't spoken yet but is very much alive. And when it does speak, it won't be impulsive. It will be deliberate. Because this isn't about desire alone. It's about identity. About choosing which version of themselves they will live as from this point forward. Last night cracked them open. What comes next will define them. And once that definition is made, there will be no pretending that this was nothing. Because people don't cry like that. They don't change like this. They don't struggle this deeply. Unless something real is asking to be acknowledged, they are reaching a point where avoidance is no longer working. The strategies that once helped them stay composed are failing one by one. Distraction doesn't distract anymore. Logic doesn't soothe anymore. Even time, which they trusted the most, has stopped helping. Instead of dulling the feeling, time is sharpening it. Every passing day adds clarity instead of distance. That scares them. Because clarity demands action. And action carries consequences. They are starting to notice how often your presence enters their thoughts without invitation. Not during emotional moments only. During ordinary ones. While doing routine tasks. While listening to conversations that have nothing to do with you. You appear suddenly, quietly, like a truth that refuses to stay buried. That's how they know this has gone too far to ignore. Feelings that show up only in emotional moments can be dismissed. Feelings that invade neutral moments cannot. Those are rooted. Those are real. They try to tell themselves that this intensity will pass. That it's just a phase of vulnerability. That they're reading too much into something simple. But that voice is weaker now. Because the other voice has grown stronger. The one that asks harder questions. The one that doesn't allow easy answers. The one that keeps returning to the same point. Why you? And why now? They don't like the answers they're finding. Because the answers point inward. To things they avoided. To needs they ignored. To parts of themselves they thought were settled. You didn't create these feelings. You revealed them. And that distinction matters. Because it means this isn't about dependency or fantasy. It's about recognition. Recognition of something they've been missing. Something they didn't know how to name until you appeared. That realization has unsettled them deeply. They are beginning to understand that the breakdown that night wasn't weakness. It was honesty breaking through years of control. And honesty, once released, doesn't retreat quietly. It keeps pushing. They are feeling that push now. In the way their patience is thinner. In the way their emotions sit closer to the surface. In the way silence around this connection feels heavier than noise. They are becoming more aware of the cost of pretending. Every interaction that avoids the truth drains them a little more. Every conversation where they hide what they feel leaves a residue. A quiet frustration. A sense of self-betrayal. They recognize that feeling from past experiences. Times when they chose what was expected over what was true. Those choices didn't destroy their life. But they dulled it. And dullness is a slow kind of suffering. One they promised themselves they would never accept again. That promise is echoing now. Louder than ever. They are standing at a crossroads they never expected to reach. One path looks sensible. Safe. Approved. The other looks uncertain. Risky. Unexplained. But alive. And aliveness has become impossible to ignore since you entered their world. They didn't realize how numb they had been until something woke them up. That awakening came with joy at first. Then confusion. Now fear. Fear not of you. Fear of what choosing you might mean about who they are. About the life they've constructed. About the compromises they've made. Choosing truth often requires dismantling comfort. And dismantling comfort feels like loss even when it leads to something better. They are mourning that potential loss already. Mourning the version of themselves that fits neatly into expectations. Mourning the ease of being unquestioned. Mourning the safety of staying within lines drawn by others. And at the same time, they are longing for the freedom of stepping outside those lines. That contradiction is tearing them apart internally. They find themselves thinking about what they would say if they finally allowed themselves to speak honestly. Not in a dramatic confession. Not in a declaration. Just in a simple sentence. One sentence that changes everything. They imagine how heavy that sentence would feel leaving their mouth. How irreversible it would be. Because once spoken, it can't be taken back. And they are not someone who speaks carelessly. Words matter deeply to them. That's why silence has been their refuge for so long. Silence allows control. But silence is starting to feel like a cage. And cages, no matter how familiar, eventually suffocate. They are noticing that they are becoming less tolerant of superficial conversations. Less interested in things that once occupied their attention. Their internal world has shifted. Priorities are rearranging themselves without permission. And you are at the center of that rearrangement. That realization makes them uncomfortable. Because it means you have influence. And influence implies vulnerability. They don't like being vulnerable. Not because they lack depth. But because depth has cost them before. Still, despite all resistance, they are moving closer to acceptance. Acceptance that this connection exists. Acceptance that it matters. Acceptance that pretending otherwise is harming them. What they haven't accepted yet is what to do about it. That decision remains suspended. Hovering. Waiting. They are testing themselves. Watching how long they can carry this without breaking again. Watching how long they can maintain balance. But balance is fragile now. One unexpected moment could tip it. One honest question. One emotional glance. One quiet pause that lingers too long. They are aware of this. Hyper-aware. That awareness makes them cautious around you. It might feel like distance. But it's actually restraint. The kind of restraint that precedes a release. They are also aware of the age difference in a new way now. Not as a flaw. Not as a mistake. But as a reality that requires courage to navigate. They are asking themselves whether they are strong enough to face the consequences of choosing what feels right. Whether they are willing to stand in their truth even if it's misunderstood. That question has no easy answer. But it's no longer theoretical. It's personal. And personal questions demand personal decisions. They are also thinking about you more carefully. About how this might affect you. About whether speaking their truth would burden you. They don't want to disrupt your peace. They don't want to impose their internal struggle onto your life. That care is genuine. And it complicates everything. Because it means they are not just choosing for themselves. They are considering you in every possible outcome. That level of care doesn't coexist with indifference. It only exists where feelings are deep. They are beginning to accept that this situation will resolve itself one way or another. Not because they decide to resolve it. But because unresolved things don't stay suspended forever. They either fade or they surface. And this is not fading. It's intensifying. That tells them everything they need to know. Even if they don't want to know it yet. You might sense a shift coming. Not in words. In energy. A seriousness. A gravity. A sense that something important is waiting just beneath the surface. That sense is accurate. Because someone is standing on the edge of truth, deciding whether to step forward. They haven't stepped yet. But they are closer than they've ever been. The breakdown that night started this process. Everything since has been movement. Slow. Internal. But irreversible. Whatever happens next will not be accidental. It will be the result of many silent battles. Many sleepless nights. Many moments of choosing restraint over impulse. And when they finally choose to speak or to step away fully, it will come from clarity, not confusion. Because confusion already broke them once. And they won't survive pretending again. This is not a passing phase. It's a turning point. And turning points don't announce themselves loudly. They reveal themselves in shifts like this. Quiet. Heavy. Unavoidable. They already know this cannot stay unfinished. Somewhere deep inside, the decision is forming even if it hasn't reached the surface yet. They feel it in the way their body reacts before their mind does. In the way silence around you feels louder than any conversation. In the way your absence now creates more disturbance than your presence ever did. That is how they know this matters more than fear. More than age. More than what people might say. Because fear creates noise, but truth creates weight. And this feels heavy in a way that can't be ignored anymore. They are no longer asking themselves whether they feel something. That question is over. They are asking whether they can live with themselves if they never acknowledge it. And that question keeps them awake. Keeps them restless. Keeps them staring at ceilings late at night, replaying moments they wish they could freeze and moments they wish they could redo with honesty. They are realizing that the version of life where they say nothing doesn't actually protect anyone. It only postpones pain and turns it inward. They've done that before. They recognize the pattern. And they know how it ends. With regret that shows up years later when it's too late to change anything. That realization is sobering. It strips away excuses. It forces clarity. And clarity is dangerous because it demands courage. They are scared. But they are also tired of being scared. Tired of carrying something this heavy alone. Tired of pretending they are unaffected when everything inside them says otherwise. They don't want to make promises. They don't want to create expectations. They don't want drama. What they want is alignment. For their outer life to stop contradicting their inner truth. And you are at the center of that conflict whether either of you intended it or not. They are standing at the edge of a moment that will define how they move forward from here. Not just with you. With themselves. And that's why this feels intense. Because it's not just about connection. It's about identity. About choosing whether they will continue living carefully or finally live honestly. Whatever happens next will come from that choice. Not impulse. Not confusion. But truth. And truth has a way of surfacing even when it's been held back for a long time. Last night cracked something open. What comes next will close nothing. It will only reveal. And once it does, there will be no going back to how things were before. This was never meant to stay unfinished.